To install the Timney Model 510 replacement trigger in your Remington Model 700 correctly, you'll need the tools from the Remington 700 DIY kit, which are the punch kit, the nylon brass hammer, and the bench block. You'll also need a pair of needle nose pliers and the correct size flathead driver or Allen head wrench to remove your action screws. Older rifles will have slotted screw heads and newer rifles will have 5/32 cap screws. On the ADL model, you'll also have a trigger guard screw that needs to be removed. This will either be a slotted head screw or an 8/36 cap screw. Although it isn't absolutely necessary, a set of snap caps for your caliber are nice to have for trigger testing, adjusting, and final adjustment function checking. The trigger takes about 20 minutes to install using the tools contained in the do-it-yourself kit. Now, before working on your firearm, make sure it's unloaded. If you have a magazine, remove it, and cycle the bolt to ensure that there are no live rounds in the chamber. If you have a fixed magazine, visually inspect it to make sure it's empty. Finally, use your finger to inspect the chamber and the magazine well. And when working on a firearm, it's always a good idea to wear a pair of safety glasses. Before you get started, it is important to know that the Timney trigger comes with a short keeper pins in the trigger mounting holes. These pins hold the sear and sear spring in place. Don't remove prior to installation, but use them as slave pins. They should be driven out as installation pins are driven in. Step 1, remove the bolt from the action and the action from the stock. To remove the bolt, press on the bolt release button in front of the trigger. To remove the stock, you'll need to unscrew the 2 action screws from the bottom and the trigger guard screw if your rifle has one. Make sure you keep track of the location of each of these screws. The action screws are the same diameter and thread pitch. The front screw, however, is a 1/4 inch shorter than the rear. Step 2, on the original factory trigger, move the safety lever to the safe position. Then with a 1/8 or a .125 drift punch, line up the front trigger pin with one of the holes in the rifle bench block. And use the brass side of the 1-inch nylon brass hammer to tap the front trigger pin left to right far enough to free the trigger assembly. Tap the rear pin from right to left far enough to free the trigger assembly, but not so far as to release the bolt stop or bolt stop spring. Step 3. Insert the Timney trigger and tap the front pin from right to left, but not so far that it presses against the bolt stop. You should be able to depress the bolt release and the bolt stop should move freely. Step 4. Tap the rear pin from left to right until it's flush with the bolt release. If the bolt stop and spring come out during installation, note how they both fit together. One spring end hooks in the trigger recess and the other on the bottom of the bolt stop, and the direction can't be reversed and still function. Now, step 5. Adjust the bolt release so it moves the bolt stop without any binding. Do this by very slightly bending the tip with needle nose pliers so it perfectly engages the notch in the bolt stop. Bend and test. This may take several tries before you get it right. Step 6. Before installing the action in the stock, inspect how the trigger fits the opening on the trigger guard. Because the trigger shoe on Timney triggers are slightly wider than Remington factory triggers, you may need to enlarge the opening of the trigger guard where the trigger protrudes from the stock, and some stock inletting may also be needed to accommodate the trigger body. Step 7. Now install the bolt in the barreled action and check trigger function and safety function. With an empty chamber or with snap caps installed, with the safety on, pull the trigger. The firing pin should not move. Next, move the safety to fire and pull the trigger. The firing pin should move. Next, cycle the bolt and make sure the firing pin stays cocked and only releases when you pull the trigger. Then finally, place the safety back on safe, cycle the bolt again, and make sure the firing pin doesn't move when you pull the trigger. Step 8. Place the barreled action into your stock. Make sure the shorter action screw is at the front and the longer one is at the rear. Tighten down the action screws to 60 inch-pounds of torque, not foot-pounds, but inch-pounds. If you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench, reasonably tight will work. Over-tightening can damage your stock and may bind up your action, so don't go too far. Install your trigger guard screws if your rifle has one. The spec on this is 30 inch-pounds. Make sure your bolt moves freely in the receiver. If it sticks or won't move, you most likely have over-tightened the action screws and they need to be loosened up a little bit. Now, step 9. Now, still with an unloaded firearm, recheck the trigger and safety function of the rifle stock back on the action. First, with the safety on, the firing pin shouldn't move when you squeeze the trigger. When you take the safety off, the firing pin shouldn't move. With the safety off, pull the trigger, the firing pin should move. Now cycle the bolt and make sure the firing pin is held back until you squeeze the trigger. Next, cycle the bolt with the safety on, the firing pin shouldn't move. Now with the safety off, open and close your bolt with some force. The firing pin shouldn't move. Finally, with the safety off, give the rifle a couple of sharp blows to the buttstock. The firing pin shouldn't move. Now be careful with plastic butt pads. You don't want to damage them. If everything checks out, you're ready to head out to the range. Step 10. When you test fire at the range, the first thing you want to check is firing pin protrusion. With the rifle pointing downrange and under control, with the safety on, load a live round into the chamber and close the bolt. The rifle should not discharge. Open the bolt, extract the live round, and inspect the primer. There shouldn't be a dent on the primer. Now with the safety off, remember to have control of the rifle. Close the bolt again. The rifle shouldn't discharge. Open your bolt and extract the live round and again inspect the primer. You shouldn't see a dent in it. With the safety on, load the live round in the chamber and close the bolt. Push the safety to fire and squeeze the trigger. The rifle should discharge. If everything checks out, move the safety to safe, open the bolt, and load 2 rounds into the rifle. Close the bolt, fire a round, cycle the bolt, and fire the next round. The second round should not fire until you squeeze the trigger. If your rifle passes these live fire tests, then your trigger installation is complete.